We're now on week 48 of no movies to talk about. So, luckily, the Marvel Cinematic Universe is going to provide us with something. Last week, we talked about episodes 1 through 5 because, oh my god, that cliffhanger at the end of episode 5, we had to come in here and talk about that. I finally, reached my maximum limit of crazy theories, and I had to get them out there into the ether. And I threw out the idea that, hey, would you guys like us to now do, just weekly episode-by-episode recaps? Not recaps, but, little reviews of every single episode of WandaVision. And if that turned out well, maybe do that for all the Marvel Cinematic Universe shows, because apparently they're going to have, a brand new episode of something almost every single week for the rest of this year. And you guys were pretty cool with that idea. You got pretty positive reception from that last episode. And also that last episode was an hour and a half long. And I'm getting to realize, you know what? If we have to wait until episode 9 for our next episode, that's going to be a 3-hour long episode.
Yeah.
So, let's come in here and let's just start talking about episode by episode. And we are now at the 90s episode, which I didn't know what they were going to parody for the 90s.
I thought they were going to parody Full House, but that was the early 90s.
That was, Full House was almost 80s.
Yeah, and they already parodied the 80s, so it's Malcolm in the Middle.
Which I would not have guessed that, but
yeah, it's
wow. We have to stop and just acknowledge what an amazing job the people on this show have done with capturing the feeling, the tone, and the look of every single one of these shows and these decades that they're parodying. Because it's not just the kids are now breaking the fourth wall, just like Malcolm did on Malcolm in the Middle. And they've got an opening that's all crazy, like Malcolm in the Middle was. No, there's camera angles in this episode. There's that angle where, by the way, this is a spoiler talk, so if you have not watched this, tune out now. And I don't just mean this particular episode, I mean all of it, which why would you start at episode 6?
We gave you 2 days in preparation.
Yeah, that's why we put these things out a couple days after, and we're not racing to get them out on Friday like every other YouTuber out there. I'm no. Give people time. I don't want to come in here and have somebody accidentally have this episode autoplay or something on them when they're not paying attention, and then all of a sudden I come in here and just start spouting out spoilers at the top. I want to give you guys a little bit of time. But yeah, in that opening, that angle of Pietro on the couch where he's and one eye opens, I was that is a Malcolm in the Middle camera angle. Mm-hmm. I can count how many times I've seen camera angles like that on that show. Or Vision, he doesn't go out trick-or-treating with him. He goes off to do his own thing, which, man, is that a dramatic thing. And it's a dramatic thing that doesn't really tie into Wanda's ideal vision, no pun intended, of this sitcom reality that they're living in. However, it's supposed to be like Malcolm in the Middle. Every episode of Malcolm in the Middle, Hal would always go off on his own little weird side adventure by himself. And I was I don't even know if you meant to do that on purpose. That in the 90s episode, Vision now gets a moment of freedom to go off and do his own thing. When you're parodying the show where the father would always go off and do his own thing, it's I don't even know if you meant to do that on purpose or if you just fell backwards into the perfect episode to have this happen in.
Yeah, it's now that I think about the 90s was when the family sitcoms started dying off.
Yeah, very much.
I mean,
oh man,
so
that metaphor.
Yeah, I mean, unless they're gonna start parodying animated family sitcoms like Family Guy or something, which I don't know.
Or Arrested Development is what I was saying for the 2000s. If they want to do an Arrested Development episode, considering that's the most dysfunctional family in television history.
Yes, I like how not only as the decades, it follows the decades, but also the trend of becoming more like our reality.
Yeah, exactly. I dig that. Although at the end of this episode, it brings up a lot of questions about what will the next...
Yeah.
We'll get into that. We're going kind of in order here. But another thing that I have to point out about how good this did of a job of parodying Malcolm in the Middle is I was mentioning that, on Malcolm in the Middle, Hal would always go off and do his own thing. But Bryan Cranston on Malcolm in the Middle as Hal, he had this very awkwardness, this super awkwardness to him. And there's that one moment where Vision is walking down the street and looking at everyone, and the reason that he looks so awkward in that moment is because of something horrifying that is happening and a realization that is happening, but his reaction to it is very much I was like, this dude had to have sat down and watched Bryan Cranston in Malcolm in the Middle, because those are his facial like reactions. I'm just like, God, the amount of like research that they had to like probably do just to nail like subtle things that are never going to come back up after this episode is done. Like, you can't act like that in the next episode. We're on to the next decade. It doesn't matter now. Yeah, it is incredible to me seeing them do stuff like that. But it's also, this was the episode that made me realize we have to give a huge shout out to the people doing the score for this show, who's doing the music for this show. Because anytime that cuts back to the regular reality, it's the Marvel Cinematic Universe music. And the Marvel Cinematic Universe music, listen, I love the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I do. You guys have watched this show for long enough that you know I am a huge MCU fanboy. I will gladly admit their music is very much the same all throughout. Unless we're going with like Guardians of the Galaxy where it's an actual soundtrack, anytime that you're talking about like the actual score, it is always like super dramatic orchestra coming. Yeah, it is always like, yeah, okay, it's just varying tones of the same kind of theme. Yeah, and there's some good stuff in there. Like I think the Avengers theme is really damn good. Like that theme has like built up over time that I'm like, oh man, I love the Avengers theme. But it's still kind of like the same.
It's still
like,
the dramatic orchestra.
It's still the dramatic orchestra, yeah. So anytime that they go back to reality, it's that. But anytime that they're in the TV, the people who are behind the music on the show, they have to come up with music that fits every single decade. And now in the 90s, they're coming up with that like goofy, wacky,
like ska music.
Yeah, ska. It's ska is what it is.
Ska. That was a big thing in the 90s.
It was. Yeah, I've got a ton of CDs back in my parents' house somewhere to prove that. Why am I ashamed of that? Ska's really damn good. I actually follow a guy on Twitter called Ska2 Network. He's actually kind of started to get me back into ska. And I'm like, don't do this to me. I know it took me too long to break free of ska. Don't bring me back into this.
You say that as you go out with your Aquabats mask on.
I do. I do have an Aquabats mask. I do. The Aquabats are really damn good, man. I will stand by that.
I'm not saying they're not.
Oh, yeah, no. Anywho, we're getting way off target. But this is the episode that made me realize, man, we have to give it up to the people doing the score because, yeah, it didn't really hit me until now. I was like, man, they have to come up with music every single episode that is just matching the tone of that decade. And on this episode, they had to come up with music that fit the 90s aesthetic, but then they also had to come up with music that fit the 90s aesthetic for a Halloween special episode.
Yes.
And like that is like an Inception level of like musical score that you had to come up with. Like, we have to take this theme and shove it inside of another theme. It's like, man, I am really damn impressed with like how much research is going into like every level of this show.
Like they watched the Goosebumps intro several times.
It feels almost like it at times, yeah. Especially there at the end. But okay, let's talk about like what actually happened on this episode. At the end of the last episode, Pietro shows back up, and it's not Guy from Kick-Ass, it's Guy from Kick-Ass. That joke, there's so many tiny ass things in here that I am just like, was that on purpose or was that a wink and nod in the audience? Because I don't know anymore. Because we're talking about how, you know, like Wanda is shaping reality here, and I keep saying this, I am convinced that there's going to be some kind of a reveal at the end that it shows like Wanda and like all the horrible shit that she grew up with. Like, you know, her parents died in a bombing, and then like she was radicalized by Hydra, then she was experimented on, and then she went off and fought the Avengers, but then joined the Avengers, so she's now working side by side with a guy whose weapons killed her parents, and then she falls in love with a robot who she has to murder to save the entire reality, only to see that beautiful thing that she did not mean anything, and then she dies and comes back 5 years later to find that everyone is now gone. It's like, yeah, you cannot blame this person for like, you know, going, all right, that's it, I've kind of had enough.
Yeah, you left to the part where her brother died.
Oh, I totally, yeah.
The whole reason why that cliffhanger was a big shock.
Yeah, exactly. Man, there's so many horrible things that have happened to Wanda. I've mentioned this, that, yeah, there's so many terrible things that have happened to her. I'm convinced there's going to be some kind of a reveal where it says the only time in her life she was happy was when she was a little kid with her family and they were watching sitcoms from America. And I'm like, yeah, I told it, like, and that's why everything feels like a sitcom. I think that's what it's going to be. But there is that theory that people have had that this is Mojo, and now that we know that X-Men are kind of involved in here in a way, I'm like, yeah, Mojo could legally be on the table. I don't think it is, especially with how this episode ends. With how this episode ends, it's like, no, Wanda is 100% in control of this thing. But if it does turn out to be Mojo, I would love for there to be a joke in here where it cuts to Mojo with his right hand yes man, Major Domo, and it's like, what are you doing? I told you to get the guy from Kick-Ass. That is the guy from Kick-Ass. Not the guy from Kick-Ass who played Quicksilver, the guy from Kick-Ass who played Quicksilver. That is the guy from Kick-Ass who played I want to see that exchange. It's not going to happen, but there's that joke in here where Pietro says Kick-Ass, and then she stops and goes, Kick-Ass. And I'm like, okay. Was that just you making the joke that, yes, the two guys who played Quicksilver in the two different movie franchises both came from the Kick-Ass movie? Or is it some really weird, like, the reason why he looks different is that Wanda, like, remembered telling her brother, oh, you kind of look like that guy from Kick-Ass, but then in her mind she pulled the wrong Kick-Ass. Like, what is happening here? There's, like, I'm turning into that Charlie Day meme, which I almost feel like we need a new title card for this series where it's just me doing putting my hand up against the wall with a cigarette in my finger. I'm, like, reading way too much in this, and I fully admit I am reading way too much in this. But that one line that should have just been a throwaway, like, that's a cute reference to that thing. I'm looking at that like, is that the key to solving all of this? I know it's not. Oh, yeah. Okay, so let's talk about Quicksilver this episode. First off, love that they're all their Halloween costumes are their costumes from the comics. In fact, you can even attest to this. The moment that it starts off and Billy is coming down the stairs talking to the camera, my very first reaction out of my mouth was, holy shit, it's his costume from the comics. Mm-hmm. Yeah, his Halloween costume is like the cheap, like homemade version of his costume from the comics. And I'm like, oh my god, that is really genius. And I didn't know how far they were going to go with that. We saw in the trailers that Wanda and Vision were both going to be in their costumes from the comics. And I love that they came up with excuses for what each of their costumes were. Like, I love that Vision was like, he's a luchador. And I was like, man, if you look at somebody with like a cape and like, you know, a semi-mask like that, like, what on earth could he possibly be? I'm like, well, colorful cape and all that. I guess he could be like, I guess. Yeah, it's close enough. Like, that's as good as you're going to get for this Easter egg, man. Mm-hmm. You guys are gonna have to excuse me. My allergies have been going nuts, so I'm fighting back sneezes at all times here. But I love that Pietro knows this isn't real. And he is almost there to be Wanda's conscience. To be like, hey, no, this is all great. You should absolutely be doing this. Anyway, here's a tiny thing I'm going to say that's really going to drive you nuts, sis. I kind of...
Just like brothers do.
Yeah. But yeah, I kind of love that. It was like, yeah, you can tell he's not real. You can tell he's like not... Well, maybe, I don't know, because there was that moment where she's asking what happened to you, and he's talking about his final moments there in Sokovia where he gets shot. But then he kind of says, like, yeah, and then I was here. And it's almost like maybe her magic did do something here.
Like, do you think Quicksilver was like, or Pietro was manifested through her, like, subconscious?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, it could be something like that. That's what I'm thinking.
Because, like, she knows, like, this isn't real, but she's, like, in complete denial. And that's why. That's
exactly what I think this is. That's why I said, like, I feel like he's there to kind of, like, be like, no, what you're doing is great, but then I'm going to say something that's going to make you doubt all this and realize what a terrible thing it is. Like, that moment where he's like, no, it really looks like you've handled everything. I mean, families are staying together, and, like, you know, he's going off about that, but it's one of those things that makes her kind of stop and have to realize, like, am I kind of torturing these families by doing this? I definitely think that it's her subconscious kind of like, it's either here's the thing, either he isn't real, and he is just a manifestation of her conscience who is there to try and convince her this is wrong, or her conscience needed something to try and convince her it was wrong, so it did actually pull Pietro in there. So whether he's real or not, he's definitely meant to be like her conscience trying to convince her this is not what she should be doing. This is all wrong. the question is he real? That's the big remaining question. Which, the fact that he's not the Quicksilver from the MCU, he's the Quicksilver from the Fox films, really does kind of imply he's not real. They gave an excuse for that, right? They gave like some kind of like, it's a very brief like throwaway line, but I couldn't really even concentrate on it because right after they say that, she then goes, "What happened to your accent? What happened to your accent?" I've loved that line. And I kind of almost feel like that's not a throwaway joke. I kind of almost feel like that's going to be some kind of a thing. I kind of feel like that's going to be some kind of a thing where she has to come in here and admit like, oh, she's running away from her past and she's trying to recreate herself in this ideal vision, again, no pun intended, of what she pictures to be like the ideal, peaceful, white picket fence American life. And she's like running away from her history, and that's why she no longer has her accent. She's like forced herself to forget, which is probably also the reason why Quicksilver might look different. She's trying not to remember Quicksilver. Yeah, man, there's so many freaking questions. But let's get into Vision subplot in this episode. This is the episode where this thing just went full-blown Twilight Zone. Which it had always been there, obviously, but this was the episode in which they were like, no, it's the kid in the cornfield episode. God, I can't remember what that episode was, but, I mean, there's literally the moment in which he's staring out at the vast wasteland of nothingness out there. It's like, that might as well just be a goddamn cornfield. Yeah, for anybody who doesn't know what I'm referencing, there was a famous episode of The Twilight Zone about a town that lived in fear of this one little boy, because that one little boy essentially had the powers of God. He could shape reality however he wanted. Kind of like what Wanda is doing in this episode. And if anybody crossed him, they would be sent to the cornfield. They would cross the kid, they would do something that the kid didn't like, and then they would just vanish and say, I sent them to the cornfield. And essentially they just be lost in this vast, endless, like, sea of a cornfield out there. It's an amazing episode, and still, like, it's just shocking how much of the Twilight Zone still holds up to this day. But that one in particular really holds up. But yeah, it's pretty much just that, because there's also like that moment where she says, don't go past this street. And it's very clear that's like, no, this is like her little snow globe town. You don't go outside of it. And we've now, ever since the last episode, we now know that the people in this town, they're still conscious. They're still like, they're out there living their lives, but they're not living their lives. They're acting out this play that Wanda has essentially made them act out. They're all doing their role, but they still know at all times that this isn't real. Like, they still have their minds inside their bodies, like screaming to get out.
Then you start going to the edge of the town.
And it starts, like, breaking down a little bit because, like, clearly the closer you are to Wanda, the more, like, she's able to keep this stuff going. The further away from Wanda you get, the harder it is for her to keep it in control.
Yeah, and it's like...
And they're essentially just background actors.
Yeah, it's like they're animatronics at, like, a theme park. Yeah. Like, they don't really have, like, a big, important plot. They just, like, move around.
They are background actors. Their job is, like, I'm going to do this motion that makes it look like I'm doing things in the background of a TV show. But if you ever, like, would stop and look at, like, one of those people and go, like, hey, what's that person doing? Oh, nothing, because they have no plot. They have no storyline. They're not a character. So their job is to move the laundry around. And, again, this shows how amazing this show is at playing with tones, because we mentioned the music. I wanted to make sure that we mentioned that, because there's that moment where Vision is walking around and he's looking at that woman, like, just doing the thing with the laundry over and over again, and it's got that wacky 90s sitcom music, the music playing in there, and
you see like a tear rolling down her eye.
At first, I wanted to laugh at that scene because, like, it's like he's real, like, they're not actually real. It's funny that these people look like they're real, but they're not actually real. And then you see the tear rolling down her eye.
And you're like, oh, shit.
Oh, no, they're real. They're real, and they're trapped like this, and they can't get out. But that music makes you kind of feel like, oh, it's kind of like a goofy gag. But then you have to sit there and be like, holy shit, my God. And it's in that moment that it really kind of hit me. This is like, God, I'm not meaning to start shit with, like, I'm not trying to start any shit between, like, this cinematic universe and this cinematic universe and this movie franchise and this movie franchise, but this is easily the darkest thing we have gotten from any superhero anything. Any superhero anything, this is easily the darkest thing we've gotten. And there's no swearing, there's no blood, there's no any of this. And like, I mentioned this back like 2 Halloweens ago. I did an unpopular horror movie opinion video. I said like, horror movies don't need blood. Anytime that I see people out there going like, man, these horror movies, like, if it doesn't have blood, then it can't be scary. I'm like, you have no freaking idea what horror is. Blood to me is a crutch in horror films, in which you're in there like, oh, well, we couldn't really write any interesting characters or really dramatic scenes or anything, so just splatter blood everywhere, and that lets people know it's supposed to be scary. I'm like, that doesn't equal scares. And I'm just looking at this thing like, there's like none of that like edgy, extreme edgelord shit in here. Like, and this is so freaking dark. Yeah, that moment of the lady with the tear coming down, holy cow, that was so, like, that just hit me in the gut. And the fact that it's got the wacky 90s sitcom music playing over it, it's like, it is so disturbing. But then like the further he gets out into town, and like the more you see people just like not even moving anymore, like they're just like standees out there. And here's where we start getting into real big questions. Because he runs into Agnes at the edge of town. And this entire time I've been like, Agnes has something to do with all this. Agnes is way too involved. She knows way more than she's letting on. Also, her name, somebody pointed this out to me. Oh man, I wish I had my phone on me right now so I could give you credit. I apologize. If it was you on Twitter who told me this, shout yourself out in the comments down there, because you deserve credit for this. But her name is Agnes in the show. Agnes was the name of the mother on Bewitched, who was like the big head witch. And apparently, Agatha Harkness, the person who trained Wanda in the comics, her design and her character was based on Agnes from Bewitched. So it's like, it can't be. This cannot be coincidental. Ooh. Like, it's eating itself. It's like a giant, like, this entire conspiracy is just an Ouroboros at this point. And we're just like, there's too many things lining up. It is like Agnes into Agatha Harkness, into Agnes in WandaVision, into Agnes in Bewitched, back into Agatha Harkness. It's like, it's just looping around. It's like, it has to be Agatha Harkness. But then we get to this episode, and I've been like, she knows more than she's letting on. And then Vision goes in there and uses that power of his to like basically scramble their brain so that they wake up. And she's now panicking, and she's going like, she's not gonna let us leave. She's not gonna, like, she's freaking out in that moment. And then she's like, man, again, you just talk about like when this show gets dark, which is like, am I dead? No, why would you think that? Because you are. And it's like, holy man, that is so, they just literally, like, an MCU project just stopped just to have a lady just scream at someone, you're dead. Like, why won't you realize that you're dead? Like, we're all in hell is what she's basically saying. I
kind of have a theory.
Go for it.
Like, I believe Agatha, like, witnessed Wanda making her own reality, and she was driving out of Westview to avoid it.
Oh.
But the Hex eventually caught up to her. And like she's literally like stuck halfway between Wanda's reality and actual reality.
Which could be why she like we find her there like at the edge of town, just like in her car, just kind of like staring off at like the road that we know she can never cross. And maybe that's like her cycle, is that she's just like constantly stuck going back into that loop. Yeah, I like that idea. I like that. I still like, it's gotta be Agatha Harkness. It's gotta play into that somehow. So in my mind, I'm also still thinking like, maybe her like confrontation with Vision in here, she's still kind of playing a character in there. It's like, I need to say this specific thing to Vision to get him to do this thing.
Right.
So it could still be that, but man, it's making me doubt this, even with like a truckload of evidence that's Agatha Harkness.
But it's like, they also mention like every time you like go through the Hex, like your
something happens.
Yeah, like your DNA gets kind of scrambled. So I'm wondering if like that's happening to Agatha, and like why she is able to like kind of like get into Wanda's head a bit.
Maybe. Also, you know, as we mentioned in the comics, Scarlet Witch uses magic, and Agatha Harkness was the one who taught her magic. We need to now bring this up. the commercial on this episode. Every single commercial has been stuff from Wanda's life. The very first one was for a toaster from Stark, which Stark bombs killed her parents. The next one was from a suit from Hydra. Next one after that, I don't remember what it was, but it was for Strucker.
I think Strucker was like a paper towel commercial.
No, I think that was the next one. I think that was the...
Hydra.
Hydra was a suit. Strucker was a watch.
Oh, yes,
Strucker was a watch. And then the next one was the paper towel commercial, and that, I don't remember the name of it, but it was the name of the city where Wanda tried to stop that guy from blowing himself up, but then she accidentally threw him into a building, so he blew that up, and that caused the Sokovia Accord, that caused the Civil War. This one, so all that is stuff that we have seen. All that stuff that we have seen in the movies. So if you're going by the patterns, okay, so maybe the next one is gonna be like the Infinity Stones, Thanos or something, maybe something along those lines, because that's where Wanda's next appearance was after Civil War. No, it's for yogurt, and the brand of yogurt is Yo Magic. They just flat out go, no, it's magic.
It's magic, yo.
Yeah, there is magic in here now. And that ad where the shark shows up to that kid who's on that island and is like, I'm so hungry. Well, then have some Yo Magic, bro. And then the kid is like, oh, yes, food. And then the kid tries to peel it open, but he can't. And then he just slowly starves to death and turns into a skeleton. Again, that's one of those things that you could look at and be like, oh, yeah, it's kind of just a weird bit of dark humor or something that commercial for kids yogurt or kids starved or something. I was like, but we haven't seen any dark humor like that in any of the other commercials.
No, this is a sign that her reality is falling apart.
Or maybe we never saw Wanda's exposure to magic. This is our first hint of something that happened in between Infinity War and Endgame, and here. This is our first exposure, okay, what the heck happened to Wanda off screen that we have not seen yet?
Oh, wait, you think, she brought, Vision's dead body to, Agnes or something?
Oh,
and
could be.
Because, she also, knows magic or something like that? And then when she realized what Wanda's doing, she's like, oh, shit, I gotta get out of here, and then it was too late?
Maybe something like that, or maybe, this kid, is trying to open this thing of magic and then dies trying to do it. There might be maybe Wanda tried to learn magic, but something happened to Wanda, and now maybe Wanda kind of died herself, and now Wanda because we get this is also our first episode where Wanda mentions how she created the town, and she kind of talks about how oh yeah, there was kind of I just kind of felt nothing. And I almost felt like I was just in nothingness. And then just this happened. So maybe she was trying to learn magic, and then that nothingness. Pietro was talking about what it was like to be dead. He was like, yeah, I remember being in Sokovia. I got shot, and now I'm here. Maybe Wanda also died off screen at some point trying to learn magic, and her body got resurrected through this magic in some way, and that's what's caused her to kind of go off the deep end in some way. Maybe it's not really Wanda right there anymore, just something that thinks it's Wanda.
Do you think this other Wanda is the Scarlet Witch? ?
That's a hell. Wow, that's a hell of a way to put that. But yeah, I get what you're saying. And because Wanda has not been quote unquote the Scarlet Witch. She has no superhero name in this universe. And the reason she hasn't really been called Scarlet Witch is because she hasn't really used magic until this point. Maybe we are now looking at some kind of a magical being walking around in Wanda's body, which, again, this is all meant to be kind of vaguely inspired by Avengers Disassembled and House of M, which was the storyline where Wanda has psychotic breakdown. But because that was really bad writing, someone else had to come in here later and go that wasn't actually her. She got possessed by a weird demon by Dr. Doom. It would still be taking inspiration from the comics if they came in here and said, yeah, that's not really Wanda. She's being possessed by some weird demon or something.
So you think maybe Dr. Doom is behind?
I don't think so. Listen, we got one X-Man in here. We ain't about to get Dr. Doom and stuff. Although there is a theory in this episode, Monica Rambeau mentions that she knows a scientist that they're going to go to. And a lot of people are coming in here going, Reed Richards, it's Reed Richards. It's Mr. Fantastic from the Fantastic Four, it's Reed Richards. It's got to be Reed Richards. I don't think it's that. It's simply because I think that's a lot of things to start introducing here all at once. But it could be. I'm giving it maybe a 25% chance. But I've heard other people throw out there. There's a character in the comics, Blue Marvel, who he's one of the smartest guys in the Marvel universe, and he and Monica dated for a while. It could be him, and he's an awesome character in comics. So if they want to introduce him, I'm all behind it. So, man, there's so many. I'm just jumping all over the place. I thought this would be easier if we did episode by episode. But, God, this episode still just gave us so much to talk about. But, yeah, I still, magic is now, they've now said magic. Magic is on the table, and I got to bring it back up. I do not think that kid dying in the little, claymation cartoon advertisement for yogurt, that's a sentence I just said. I don't think that's just some weird bit of dark humor. I think that, because the kid is, desperately trying to grab this magic inside, which is, it's the yogurt, but it's called magic, so it's this kid desperately trying to grab magic, and they can't do it. That's gotta mean something. I do not, I think this show is too smart for that to just be a throwaway thing.
Do you think, the kid is, supposed to, represent, one of, Wanda's or Vision, Billy or Tommy, or,
Huh.
Because, they do eventually, get their powers in this episode.
Billy learns magic, yeah.
Yeah.
Billy starts throwing out that magic in there, which, man, it is so weird to me to see, the Young Avengers fan base out there love Billy and Tommy so much, and it's been weird seeing me seeing them on Twitter going, man, I felt like a proud mom when I watched Billy and Tommy use their powers for the first time, and I'm just sitting over here those are fake magic children, they're not real, and this is all a crazy reality where real people are actually being trapped in hell. This is not something to applaud anybody. It's very weird seeing the disconnect between me and the Young Avengers fans on this one. I'm just okay, you guys do know that the real people are suffering greatly because of this, while these kids just have no idea and they're just in their own little fantasy land, right? Right? Yeah, it's man, again, you talk about just looking at bits and pieces of this episode and how dark it is, and there's that moment her neighbor, the guy who's the head of the community watch, and he's on the radio what's that? Someone smashing all the pumpkins? And now all the candy is gone, and people are suddenly covered in silver string. And while he's saying all this, you're seeing Pietro and the kid just run around doing all these crazy things, and oh, that's funny. But then after that one, it's she's oh, is Vision with you? No, he's not doing it. He's not with us today. He's off duty tonight. And then you're huh? And then he goes, is something wrong, Wanda? Because if something's wrong, I can help you with that, Wanda. And it's in that moment that again you're just again, you have to remind yourself, this guy is terrified of Wanda rewriting reality, and in order to have the tiny bit of free will that he actually has, he has to use that to basically just go, Wanda, what can I do you for? I'm playing along. I read all my lines, Wanda. Please don't rewrite reality again. I'm just and you might as well just have a laugh track again in there, because the music's so goofy in there. It's just crazy, the disconnect between the dramatic scenes, between not even dramatic scenes, but what is a dramatic scene with the goofy music in there. I would love to see somebody go back through this and put really dramatic music in there just to show how powerful background music is into film and television. Mm-hmm. This would be an amazing thing to do an experiment with that, just to show no, the moment that you change the musical cues, it changes everything in here. Also, someone pointed this out on Twitter, I have not gone back and rewatched this entire series yet or anything. I actually kind of am thinking maybe I'm going to do that before the final episode comes out, just to see everything that I might have missed. But somebody brought this up on Twitter, that scene in the very first episode where they're at dinner now hits completely differently. That scene where the mom from that 70s show is going, oh, stop it. Stop it. Stop it. Stop it. When I watched it the first time, I was this is a fake reality. Yeah, I know this is a fake reality. So she's trapped in a loop or something, I guess, kind of. But then you watch it now, and you realize she's turning to Wanda as she says that. And it's she's not talking about, she's not reading the script of, oh, my husband's so crazy. Oh, stop it, you. She's slowly, she's using whatever bit of mental power she has left to try, to basically just beg Wanda, stop making us do this. Stop it. Please. And God damn, that's so dark. That is so crazy dark. Speaking of dark, when Vision breaks through the border in this episode, and he is like just like struggling to climb out there, and like bits and pieces of him are flying off him back in there, and he's still pushing his ass to like get out of there, and he's just screaming to all the people who are going to him, please, you have to help the people. Like, he's not even asking for them to help him. He's just like, help the people inside. You have to help them, which, God, man, you look at this and this is an insanely dark show. And this is a very dark moment, but you look at that and you can't help but just love Vision in that moment, because despite the fact that he's being ripped apart, he's still like, he's being an Avenger in that moment. He's like, take care of the people. Forget me, save the people inside. Man, that just hit so hard. And we're just sitting there as the camera watches him die in the most painful way yet again. I remember turning to you in that moment and I just went, how many times are they going to kill this guy? Which literally right after that, Pietro makes the joke of, come on, Wanda, your dead husband can't die twice. And that guy like causes Wanda to just lose it all over again, which that's the moment in there in which I looked at this and I said, yeah, it's not some... She might be being manipulated. She might be being manipulated by someone else, but she's definitely not trapped inside of something else and something else is controlling this, because we clearly see she makes the border grow larger and consume more things.
Yes, including some of the people from S.W.O.R.D.
Some of the people from S.W.O.R.D. who get turned into clowns, and man, you keep talking about like how they're just trapped in hell. All you can think is like, man, these are guys who showed up here to try and save a town full of people, and now they're like juggling for the rest of eternity.
Literal clowns.
Yeah.
Like.
I saw so many great things on Twitter after this, in which it said like, in which it was spoilers for WandaVision, and then it just said the S.W.O.R.D. agents after Wanda expanded the border, and it was all those memes of people like dressing up like clowns. Oh man. Yeah, but here's, man, Darcy is now trapped inside, and all I can think is, what is Darcy going to like? Is Darcy going to have any of her thoughts from the real world in there? Because remember, we're moving ahead by decades. We're not going to be in the 2000s. Darcy was alive in the 2000s. Like, Darcy, you know, she definitely, like, hell, that was close to when she was even, that was close to when she found out about Thor, if we're talking about late 2000s.
It's like, this episode also made me realize that people who willingly go into the Hex have their conscience. But people, like, you remember when Rambo went in, she, like, still has, like...
A little bit.
Oh, she has, like, a tiny bit left.
Yeah.
But, like, people who are forced into it have no control.
Yeah, because the harder she has to fight to keep them in control, the harder...
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, like sense. The guy who went through the sewer who became the beekeeper.
Well,
like,
we don't even know what happened to that guy.
Yeah, exactly.
Did he even survive? What happened to that dude? She's just gone. Man, that dude was just like, she just said no. And then reality got rewritten. Is he dead? What happened to that guy? We don't know. Is he going to probably be swarmed? Was my crazy ass theory from the last episode going to be right? Who even knows? Yeah, it's... But yeah, you're right. When he popped out of the sewer, it was kind of like he was there for a she was worried about that guy. So you do have a point. He might have still has consciousness intact. Man, so many things to freaking think about right now. Like, is Vision going to still have his memories of him trying to escape and knowing what happened to people in town in the next episode? Or now that the border is bigger, Wanda's going to be trying even harder to keep things together. So is she going to be like even more unstable? What the hell is going to happen with any of that?
Like, what other sitcoms are they going to try and parody before?
Like we said, if we're getting into the 2000s, like, Arrested Development is all I can think of now. Because the 2000s was during that time in which people were like, yeah, the sitcom is kind of dead. At least, like, Laugh Track is dead. Like, now we've moved away from that, which... Yeah.
I mean, there are some, like, sitcoms out there still who have, like, laugh tracks, but it's like, nobody really watches those anymore, so...
Yeah, they're out there for, like, the older audience that kind of just wants to be like, this is what sitcoms were like when I was a kid. But yeah, I'm like, okay, maybe it's going to be, like, Arrested Development, maybe it's going to be The Office, which if it's The Office... all I can picture is like everybody's confession scenes and how freaky that's going to be. Like,
yeah.
Because there'll be like some confessions where people are like, oh, everything's great, and oh, here's a joke, and this thing. And, but
like
then there's going to be other people who's just like, please, you have to help, and then just immediately cuts them off.
Yeah, it's like you mentioned, like now that you mentioned like the confession scene, it's like I'm thinking about like where they parody Malcolm in the Middle, where the kids talk to the camera.
I didn't even mention that, and I'm so glad you brought it back up because I wanted to bring that up, and I totally forgot to bring it up. But yeah, I'm like, okay, yeah, they're parodying Malcolm in the Middle, and Malcolm breaks the fourth wall. But then, like, there comes a moment in which I have to stop and realize, oh, right, the not real magic child is breaking the fourth wall, talking to all of us, talking to the sword people on the other end, watching this shit through his mom's magical border. I don't know if that's just them saying, yeah, they did this on Malcolm in the Middle, so that's just how it's done. Or if it's them like, no. Remember, it wasn't Tommy, the kid with super speed. It was Billy, the kid with magic. He's able to break the fourth wall inside of his mom's magic border. Yeah, I'm like, that could totally be a thing. Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that back up because I really wanted to talk about that. Is that what you were going to say, or did I just totally cut you off?
No, I was just gonna bring up like, oh hey, since like they do like they break the fourth wall in The Office, I was wondering like if they're gonna parody that and do more fourth wall breaking in like the next episode with that.
It all depends on what they end up doing, because like I said, to me, Arrested Development seems like the one to do, because Arrested Development, like, again, it was a family show. The Office is not a family show.
No.
Not saying that families can't watch it. What I mean is there's no family in it.
Yes.
Again, trying to fight back a sneeze right now. Sorry, everyone. But Arrested Development, it was about a family. And it was about a super crazy dysfunctional family. At this point, we're breaking down to that point. So yeah, I would not be shocked if that was what the next episode was. Trying to think of like everything. Like, again, I'm just trying to think, what the hell could Darcy be? And I'm almost wondering, and this is like a really messed up thing to throw out there, but I'm actually thinking, like, since Darcy knows the most about this and she could be seen as like the biggest threat to all this, what if in the next episode they just have a pet cat and it's called Darcy? Like, that would be like the most messed up thing. Like a pet cat, a pet dog, a pet hamster or something. Like something that in no way could fight back. Something in no way could serve as a threat to them. And like they just say like, oh yeah, this is our new like hamster, Darcy. And I'm just like, it's messing me up just thinking about that possibility.
Oh my god, you just like gave me like the craziest thought that like they're gonna parody like Sabrina the Teenage Witch and Darcy would be Salem.
And it talks to, and like everybody sees that as a regular cat, but like Billy, the kid with magic, like goes, like suddenly it just starts talking to him and it's like, no kid, listen, you have to listen to me. Something is wrong here. Oh man, that would be good.
And because like magic is like so like a big thing in like Sabrina, it's like it's like a common. End up being a common thing with them in a WandaVision.
Yeah, it would make sense. It just fits like it almost. The only reason why I would say that wouldn't work is because A, that was a 90s show and we're going into 2000 now.
Yeah.
But also because it fits too well. Like it's just like, man, that is like a glove just sliding right into place. Yeah, man, that just feels like holy crap. But yeah, I have never felt worse about seeing the credits to a TV show pop up than I did on this episode. Because I was just like, okay, Pietro showing up, all right, that's a big cliffhanger, got me like speculating on everything that's coming next episode. This one not only is a big cliffhanger, but it's like the, no, I need to know now mode. Like, this hurt when those credits popped up. God, I have not been this invested in a TV show in forever. Not Mandalorian, not anything on HBO Max or anything. Like, we've been watching Game of Thrones slowly.
We were,
but other stuff has come up, and I'm just like, yeah, man, nothing has kept me this invested. And it's gotten to the point where it's like the same because it's like comics or it's the MCU or anything. This is just a well-made show, and you need to know what's going to happen. Any other final theories that we want to throw out? I will say, man, I love that like Sword is now gone and all that's left is Monica and Jimmy. Like, which by the way, I know that Monica becomes a big A-class superhero in the comics. She becomes one of the most powerful characters in the Marvel Universe. But Jimmy is just a guy who he can fight, and he's smart, and he's like is a good super spy. In this universe, he's not a super spy; he's an FBI agent. But it's still involved in like government organization kind of thing. Sorry, I'm trying to really fight back this sneeze. Okay. But in this episode, I do enjoy that we got to see him knock some people out. And I'm like, good, he's not, because I'll be honest with you. God, I forgot his name. Oh God, the actor's name. Fudge, I totally forgot. Because in the last episode, I was like, yeah, he's one of the most charming people in all of Hollywood. Now I feel bad about that. But you guys know me, you know I'm terrible with names. But when he popped up in Ant-Man and Wasp, he was great in that role. Because that actor is insanely charming. So he's going to be great in whatever. And if you go like, hey, we're going to write this really charming character for you to play, he's going to, of course, knock it out of the park. And yeah, he was fantastic in Ant-Man and Wasp for what he had to do. But there was that part of me that was like, yeah, but he's nothing like Jimmy in the comics. Like, Jimmy Woo in the comics is like, he is like a badass super spy guy. I'm glad they had him come in here and he knocked some people out in this. And I'm glad to see him being very serious in here. Because like, all right, that's a little bit more, like he was very charming and likable and family friendly in Ant-Man and Wasp because that's supposed to be their family friendly, likable, charming side of the MCU. So because they had a different tone, his character had a different tone when he was in there. Now that he's in here, very serious, he's having the tone there. So in other words, I'm just glad to see him acting more like his character in the comics, a little bit more like that. But Randall Park, that's his name, I think. I know those are his initials, but I think that's it. But somebody threw this out on Twitter, and I'm sorry to keep referencing Twitter, but man, Twitter's had some good ideas about this show. Somebody threw out that the next Marvel spin-off show that they want to see come out of this is they want to basically just be like an X-Files show, where it is Jimmy going across the country just investigating weird cases within the MCU. I love that idea. I freaking love that idea because they've tried to, like, I know on Hulu they've got the like Hellstorm show, which no one cares. No one gives a shit about like your bad Constantine ripoff. No one wants to watch that. But this is like an actual kind of unique thing. Like no one's tried to do like the X-Files kind of in a comic book universe. And this guy, he's already had exposure to some weird stuff. He's an incredibly likable actor. Yeah, I would watch the crap out of that show. Every single episode, just a weird, slowly building thing, make kind of like Supernatural, where it's like, okay, different cases every episode, but there's like one big thing that's kind of building up towards the last season. Yeah, love it. Love the idea. I want to see that so bad. Also, the director of S.W.O.R.D., I said in the last episode, it's like, yeah, it's kind of like, he's definitely up to something. He's definitely up to something. We now know for a fact he's hiding some information. So we now know for a fact he is up to something.
Yeah, like he's clearly honing in on Vision specifically.
Yeah, and I'm
wondering like if he's trying to like use Vision as like rebuild him as a weapon.
Oh, that would be like you want to go with like the government guy is doing something bad for the government. Turn this guy into a weapon is like that is like in the handbook. That is like that is like Mysterious Government Man 101.
I mean, it's like they already had the body, so it's like I was wondering. It's like, well, he's dead. We might as well just like repurpose him.
They were doing something to him in S.W.O.R.D. They were doing something to him in S.W.O.R.D. Wanda broke in there, got him out of there.
I was wondering if like part of her was like trying to like help him. Like, not become a weapon anymore?
Yeah. Like, listen, like, maybe she wasn't even trying to bring him back to life. Maybe he was just like, you're not going to desecrate his body by doing that to him. Something like that.
And maybe that's why she went to, like, Agatha or Agnes?
Yeah, totally. Also, we did mention this in the last review that we did, is that I think the writing on here was incredibly smart, but one bit of bad writing I thought was in here was that Wanda broke into S.W.O.R.D. headquarters and they didn't mention this to anyone until like after they had been studying this thing for a week. They didn't like that. Just makes no sense that they wouldn't bring this up unless
they're hiding something.
And I said this: the only reason that they would hide that from them is if they didn't want anyone to know they were doing something, or if the video footage is fake in some way and they're trying to set Wanda up. But at this point, I don't think that's true. So that does lead us back to like, what were you guys doing with Vision's body? Mm-hmm. What were you doing that you didn't want anyone to know you were doing? And I have seen people bring up, I mentioned that there was like an Easter egg in the first episode where you see like the shadow of like Grim Reaper's helmet. And a lot of people are like, maybe Grim Reaper's behind this. I was like, that doesn't really work without Wonder Man and his whole relationship with Vision and all that stuff in there, since Grim Reaper's Wonder Man's brother. But I've heard people in here bringing up that it's like, okay, maybe they're going to have this guy who's the head of S.W.O.R.D. Maybe he's going to turn out to be the Grim Reaper, which doesn't fit the comics at all. However, we're, 22 movies into the Marvel Cinematic Universe at this point?
It's become its own monster at this point.
At this point, I'm like, okay, listen, I would like it if you had the tiniest little throwback to the comics. But at this point, like, if you can make it work, you can make it work.
Yeah.
If you can, like, I mean, listen, Mysterio has nothing to do with Tony Stark, but that was his entire driving motivation in the Spider-Man film. Yeah, worked. It worked 1,000%. It was great motivation for him in that film. Vulture in that first Spider-Man film didn't match his character at all from the comics. Don't care. It was an amazing character that you created in there. It was wonderful. I loved it. So yeah, you can change these characters around completely to be something different as long as you make it work. So I'm like, okay, if he turns out to be Grim Reaper, you got the setup. Let's see the execute. Let's see how you play this out. Let's see if that's where you're going. So I was like, all right, you know what? In the last episode, I was like, if it turns out to be Grim Reaper behind this, I'm going to be disappointed because they didn't set it up enough. But I didn't stop and think, oh, what if the guy they have been setting up is Grim Reaper? Yeah, okay, yeah, you have been setting it up then. And again, the inside of this big magic dome, Wanda is going to become more and more unstable. And we do know that death is playing a large role in this. We know that Vision died. We know that Pietro died. They're all coming back. And now with that yogurt commercial, again, that has to be some kind of a reference to death. Death is something important that's going on here. The Grim Reaper is a guy who is obsessed with death and bringing people back to life. It would make a whole lot of sense if you had him coming in here.
Yeah, honestly, I'm wondering if, like, some of the people in the dome, like, died somehow, but, like, Wanda's still manipulating them.
Oh, my God. Wow. I didn't even think about that. This is genuine reactions here. What if Wanda isn't keeping them all trapped in there? What if Wanda is keeping them all alive? What if something happened in this town that killed everyone? Maybe it was S.W.O.R.D's fault, and Wanda is trying to use magic to save them all. Like, the moment that she drops the dome, they all drop dead. Maybe that's what happens. Oh man, I don't know.
It's like, but like they're in pain. It's like, do you let them die or do you let them live and suffer?
Yeah.
It's like,
I don't think that's what it's going to be, but that thought is in my head now.
It's still a possibility.
It's on the table. It's not like I'm giving it like a 15-20% chance, so not huge, but possible. It's within the realm of possibility. Holy cow, I didn't even think about that. Wow. But yeah, we do know, like, I definitely think that Grim Reaper, like, I think that people are on the money now. Like I said, in our last review, I was like, man, if they have it be Grim Reaper, there's like no setup for that at all. But that's because in my mind, I was like, yeah, because you don't have Wonder Man, and he's obsessed with like his brother Wonder Man, and Wonder Man is connected to Vision in this way, so like there's no connection. And I'm like, man, I gotta get that comic shit out of my mind.
Yeah,
this ain't the comics.
This is the movie. But cinematic universe.
But Grim Reaper is a guy, he's obsessed with death. Vision died, back to life. Pietro died, back to life. That yogurt commercial, someone died, and we don't even know who it is, but it's connected to all this magic that's going on in here. So something is going on right now. And yeah, so there is people coming back to life. Grim Reaper set up. He is absolutely set up. And I wouldn't be shocked if at the end of all this, like, it comes down to like a standoff between Wanda and the head of S.W.O.R.D. guy. I can't remember his name. But yeah, and the head of S.W.O.R.D. guy. But Wanda's mind is breaking down because she's stretched her powers too much. So everything is getting distorted and warped and being twisted in some way. And all this is happening because she's afraid of death. Because, I mean, her entire life has been defined by death. Her parents died when she was a kid. All this stuff has gone on like that. So, like, maybe the end is that it's a stand-up and, like, her magic is slowly warping him into the thing that she fears the most. The Grim Reaper. Holy crap! This show is smart, and I just wrote a fanfic for the final couple episodes that might actually happen. But that's what they do. Oh my god, this thing is smart.
This is one, man, I feel so bad for Falcon and Winter Soldier. Because that was supposed to be the first show. And because it was going to be the first show, you can watch the trailers for all these MCU shows and be like, yeah, that's the one that's supposed to like the MCU movies. That's just like basically a Marvel Cinematic Universe movie just going to be in television format. Yeah, that's why it was going to be the first show. It's because it was like, here's our way of easing you in. Like, you're used to the movies. Bam. It's a show now. You want to take that? It's a show now. There. See? It's that thing that you like, just in a different format. So now you're used to it. So now we can start being experimental. But because of COVID, they had to push back filming of that thing, whereas this thing was already shot and done with. So they were like, screw it, let's just put that one out first. So now the big, crazy, reality warping, just working on 20 different levels show is out first. And now you expect us to just go back to the MCU like, hey, he's flying around, hey, he's stopping Baron Zemo. Oh, man. I feel bad for Falcon and Winter Soldier.
You never know, they might pull it off.
They could. I mean, hey, listen, I'm rooting for it. Falcon is one of my favorite characters. I'm glad to see that dude finally pick up the shield, and I want to see how that show turns out. And I'm really hoping that it is bold. I'm hoping that is a bold show. Because the run that's based on in the comics, it was a run all about like America's current political climate, because it was, a black man is now Captain America, and you had like Fox News coming out and being like, we should have him give back the shield, hashtag give back the shield. This man, we don't even know what his alliances are to. Steve Rogers, we could all trust that man. We don't know anything about Sam Wilson. Yeah, so it's like people just coming in here like, I don't trust this guy. You're not my Captain America. Like people saying that stuff. They could get smart with that show, and they could get bold with that show, making big statements. So I'm hoping that they do. Because if it's just a basic, like, hey, we're going to go around the world and just stop this super spy guy, I'm like, I think people need more than that after WandaVision. You need to challenge people after WandaVision. So I'm hoping that show comes in here and gets, like, really political. I'm hoping that it gets, like, really bold with the statements it wants to make. So, yeah, I'm rooting for it. Because after that, we got, what do we have after that? There's What If, which is going to be their first animated series. Which that one's just like pure fan service. But that's what If is. That was what If was in the comics. That's why I love the What If comics. So I'm like, yeah, the What If show doesn't have to be anything big and crazy. It just has to be big, crazy fan service.
I mean, literally, like, fan fiction is built on What If.
Yes, absolutely. So it's like, T'Challa becomes Star-Lord? Done. Cool. That's all I care about. I don't need anything more than that. And then you got Loki, which Loki is going to be a time heist. It's going to be like going through alternate realities and alternate timelines, just like doing some big crazy Loki scheme. And like, okay, yeah, you can totally get weird and trippy with that one. So yeah, they've got like big crazy stuff planned. So I'm just like, but man, after this, the bar has been set high. But yeah, wow, I seriously did not think we were going to go that long on one episode. I'm glad we did not wait until the finale to talk about this again. So yeah, come back next week when we talk about episode 7. Any last things you want to throw out there?
Not that I can think of.
Yeah, geez, we got 3. How do we have 3 more episodes of this? Like, after what happened in this episode, I'm like, no, we have to have, like, there's, like, 2 max. There's 2 max. 3, how are you going to get 3 out of this? We're going to have to see. Man, I have no idea how this thing could be, like, disappointing in the end. I have no idea how, like, at the end of this, I could just be like, oh, it was all a waste.
And that was, like, a big question in the last review for this.
And I remember my answer, like, at the end of our last review, I was like, okay, here's my honest question to you guys. What could they do in this that would disappoint you guys? What would be the thing then the last episode would make you go, oh, man, it's ruined? And my thing was, yeah, it becomes Grim Reaper. And it just becomes Grim Reaper because they didn't set it all up. Now within one episode, I'm like, it's going to be Grim Reaper and it's going to be awesome because they set it all up. Yeah, man. Woo. The show is so good. I do think the only thing that will still bum me out right now is if Pietro is in no way connected to, like, the Fox stuff. Simply because it's like, okay, that's a great Easter egg if you went with that being an Easter egg. It's a great Easter egg. But it's such an Easter egg, all of us out there were like, what does that mean? So if it means nothing, it will be disappointing. However, it might mean nothing in this show. It could totally mean something down the road. Because we know in the next Spider-Man film, Doc Ock is going to be played by the guy who played him in the Tobey Maguire films. Electro is going to be played by Jamie Foxx, who played him in the Andrew Garfield movies. So we know that a lot of the actors from the previous films are returning for this one. It could be that, like, it means nothing in this episode. And a lot of people are speculating, okay, so they're going to do Spider-Verse in the next Spider-Man film, going in alternate realities. They might not do that. They might just say, no, the MCU characters look like that as well. And then it's not until we get into Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness that he goes, parts of alternate realities have been bleeding into our own reality. So it might mean nothing in this show. And then when we get into Doctor Strange, which we know Scarlet Witch is going to be in that film, that then they turn to the camera and like, here's what that actually meant when the Fox guy showed up. So if it isn't explained, I'm not gonna be disappointed, but I will be looking for something down the road. Oh man. These are going to go on forever. Thank you guys very much for tuning in for another recap of WandaVision. Oh man, come back next Monday when we do episode 7. This show is wild and I love it, and I hope that I was gonna say I hope it goes on forever, but no, I want a finale. I want answers. I want this to be done because I can't take this going on forever. But man, I saw people saying like, man, I can't wait for season 2. I'm like, there ain't gonna be a season 2, man.
If the show keeps going on, these reviews are gonna keep going on.
Yes.
Like if it goes on to like the second season, there's gonna be like 5-hour like P-gores of it or something.
Yes, our one P-gore for one episode will be longer than the entire season.
It's like we'll have to like start live streaming our P-gores and everything just so
we're going to have to live stream it while I am like some little tiny player down here, have the episode rolling, and I keep freeze framing to zoom in like John Madden, just drawing on the screen. Alright, see, when Vision's powers were flying off here and going back into the end zone, that was clearly a reference back to Endgame. Yeah, I'm a terrible John Madden. Anyway, we've been going on for long enough. Bye, everybody.
Bye.